What's up, guys? Rath back again with another How to Win series with our daily fantasy college football tips with our Rath's learning curve. And our tips for today, looks like we're on tip number 8, is how to use team statistics, what are the most important statistics, and what we need to look for, especially when picking our offensive players, and what we're looking at on our skill position players from a matchup perspective. Talked about Vegas lines, talked about how to use those, but now we want to get into matchups and what are the most important things that we need to look for. So we're going to do a screen share with you today. I'm going to use a site called Team Rankings because I like the way that they have it all laid out for you. Let's pop over there. All right, so we're going to hit you up on Team Rankings. TeamRankings.com is the website, and I go to Total Offense. That's the first place I'm going. And what I like about them is they got it all laid out. They tell you what they did in 2014, 2013. Really what I'm looking at there is, kind of what they did last year. Got it sorted from high to low. So we see the most potent offenses are teams like Baylor, Marshall, Oregon, Western Kentucky, TCU, Eastern Carolina. So I can name off all the players that you could have used on those teams last year. Baylor, obviously, with Bryce Petty among as far as the quarterback perspective, Rakeem Cato at Marshall. You also had running backs there as well. Marcus Mariota at Oregon. You got the quarterback from Western Kentucky who's coming back. You got Trevin Boykin out of TCU, and also Josh Doxson. You got some other guys there as well. Eastern Carolina, we know all about Shane Carden, Justin Hardy, who have since graduated. So we want to focus on the new guys that are coming in there. Miss State, Dak Prescott, Ohio State, the trio quarterbacks, Washington State, Connor Halliday, and their wide receivers. Halliday since moved on, but now you got Luke Falk. So, these are some potent offenses that you need to know. You need to know who's on the depth charts for these teams, because these are the teams that you're going to want to use. Now, we go in the opposite direction. These are players that you don't want to use. You got teams like Wake Forest, SMU, Eastern Michigan, Connecticut, Vanderbilt, South Florida, et cetera, et cetera. Really when I come down here, it isn't until I get to maybe a Minnesota who had David Cobb last year. But again, when you're looking at these teams, the teams that don't have much yardage, we're going to look at what's the percentage of rushing yards that they have, because if they have a high percentage of rushing yards, then they're still viable. But these are the teams whose offenses are not as good. So we can swing back over here. We can go to rushing offense, and we can see who the best rushing teams were in the country last year. Of course, this is by attempts per game. So not by yardage, this is by attempts per game. Now, if we want to go over here, we can do rushing yards per game, yards per attempt. Talked about rushing play percentage. That's a stat that I look at quite a bit, rushing yards percentage. So really what I do is I really live on this page when I'm starting to look at my matchups. I got teams here. We talked about Boston College. Now, Boston College doesn't get that many yards, but they run 48 rushing plays a game. So Boston College running back is somebody that you want to take a look at. Last year a guy like John Hillman came on, and I recommended John Hillman quite a bit when he got the starting job, and he was super cheap, across the industry. So that's something that you want to keep an eye on. Obviously, Wisconsin with Melvin Gordon last year. Auburn's a sneaky team that you want to look at for rushing perspective. So, we got some teams here that even though the total yardage isn't strong, they do run a lot of plays. So you're looking at running backs. This is really one of the number one metrics you want to look at. Pop over here to rushing yards per game. We get that as well. We see guys like Wisconsin, Auburn, Georgia, Indiana, BC. Those are where you want some of your running backs. Rushing play percentage. Again, you got a team like Boston College that's going to run 70% of the time. You're going to want to take the starting running back on Boston College, especially if he's getting a bulk of the carries. We see Minnesota, LSU, Pittsburgh with James Conner. So these are really some good metrics when you start looking at who are the running backs that I want to focus on. We start going over here to rushing yards percentage. Again, you're looking at 65% of the team's offense is rushing. Wisconsin, Army, Navy are two completely teams that you can't even really consider. Georgia Tech as well. They just use too many players, but we got Wisconsin, BC, Indiana, Minnesota, LSU, Georgia, Oklahoma. Those are some teams that you can really focus on from a running back perspective when we talk about that. Now we do go on to passing offense. and we got the same thing. We're looking at the teams that throw the ball the most. Washington State by far threw the ball the most last year, 64 attempts per game. The Washington State quarterback, whether it was Halliday or Falk, was in play almost every single week, unless they went up a team like Stanford. But you really want to watch the matchups. But for the most part, that's definitely where you want to go. Some of the other things that you want to look at, obviously, passing yards per game is critical as well. We see Washington State at the top, along with Eastern Carolina, Baylor, Texas Tech, TCU, and Colorado State and Oregon. You also can come down. You want to look at passing play percentages. Washington State passes the ball 77% of the time. Texas Tech 61% of the time. So that's something, and that's not going to change necessarily. Keep in mind if the team is going to change the coordinator or the head coach. But at Washington State, we're going to be good there. This is insane. Washington State, 93% of their yardage comes from the air, which is absolutely insane. So those Washington State wide receivers, those Washington State quarterbacks are definitely somebody you want to look at on a week-to-week basis. So we're going to hop back out of here. You can spend a lot of time on team rankings for sure, which is a really interesting site, and you can build your own. You can build your own spreadsheets and things like that. So I would definitely advise you to dig deep into the team rankings website and start building some spreadsheets and some rankings. We'll have some stuff up on RotoCurve, but for your own references, definitely start digging into team rankings. Get familiar with who the passing offenses are, who the rushing offenses are. I'm going to hit you back here later on where we're going to flip over to the other side and we're going to talk about team defense and go over some of those statistics as well. Rath here with the learning curve again for today, how to win daily fantasy college football. Thanks again.